Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tucker, and in today's video, I wanted to look back at the 2018 NBA draft. I say look back, but it obviously hasn't been that long. And I wanted to do this because this has become an incredibly talented and stacked draft class. And I just wanted to go through like the top 7 or so players and talk about how I would now rank them about a year and a half into their NBA careers. But really quickly, before the video gets started, if you enjoy the NBA, then consider subscribing. I upload basically every single day. Okay, so for me, there's a very clear top 4. There's a first group here of 4 players that are extremely good. Then there's a bit of a gap and the rest of the class. And for me, the headliner of that top 4 has to be Kevin Knox. Okay, I'm joking. Of course it's Luka Doncic. Of course it has to be Luka. And this is a guy that, like, I'll admit to you guys, when I'm right about a player, specifically with the draft, because it's something that is so difficult to be right about a good amount of the time, I enjoy being right, and I'll take a bit of a victory lap. And when Luka was as good as he was last year, and I was saying the entire time, this guy's the best player in the draft class, I took a bit of a victory lap on that one. But I highly doubt anybody could have seen, MVP level play out of this guy in just his second season in the NBA. I know there were a ton of people that liked him, thought he should have been the first pick, thought he was better than DeAndre Ayton at the time of the draft. And, there was a lot of positive things for him, being an MVP, playing professionally for so many years before he even came over to the NBA, in a translatable skill set, along with the size and the physicality and some athleticism. But there's just no way that I would have expected him to be this good this early. I thought maybe an all-star as a second-year player would have made sense. MVP level, though, is something just completely out of this world. Next up now, and this is, again, just part of this top 4 group for me in this class, and this is really debatable, and I think this is where I'm going to probably anger some people. For me, the second best player in this class is Jaren Jackson Jr. And it really depends between him and really either of the next 2 players in this top 4. If you're actually redrafting this, it depends on what that team needs, because obviously if you already have good front court players, then Jaren Jackson Jr. probably isn't as good of a fit. And then the next 2 players are both guards, so it's kind of up in the air. But just based off of their rankings in terms of how these players impact winning, I feel like the skill set that you get from someone like Jaren Jackson Jr. is so much more rare than what you're going to get from these next 2 guards that I'll talk about later on down in the list. He's an outstanding defender, someone that can protect the rim, someone that is developing as an on-ball offensive player, but just provides so much energy on the offensive glass, and is a really good shooter as well, and can play either the 4 or the 5 spot. And just that kind of versatility and two-way play separates him, in my opinion, by the slightest of margins over either of the next 2 players in this draft class. You can probably guess who I'm going to be talking about here coming up, and I can understand that a lot of people probably expected there to be someone else here at number 2, but for me, and just sticking with what I originally thought about this draft class as Luka and Jaren Jackson Jr. being the 2 best players out of this class, I'm going to stick with that, again, just because of the versatility and the rarity of Jackson Jr.'s skill set. Which brings us now to number 3, and it's going to be Trey Young. And he's such a difficult player to read because he does so much for this Hawks team in terms of scoring, in terms of playmaking. And it's not that they don't have good players, it's just that they're all so young. They're still trying to figure out, how to play together. But at times, it does feel like if he was on a different team, even a team that was rebuilding, would we think as highly of him, because the bar is so low. Like, all he has to do, and I say all he has to do as a second-year player, is put up crazy numbers, and it's like, okay, this guy's one of the best players in the draft class. But if it was in a different situation where they weren't so committed to getting him those kinds of numbers and making him the focal point, would that be the case? I don't know. I'm nitpicking here. He's had an outstanding start to his career. I'm just explaining why he's number 3 rather than number 2, because I just feel like he's a player that you have to build your team around. Every decision they're going to make moving forward is going to be about how to best utilize him, which is fine. That's the case for most players in the NBA. But I just feel like the other 2 players above him in these rankings affect winning in a more positive way, at least to this point. They've been put in better situations, no doubt. But until we really see it from him, I struggle to put him above either, obviously, Luka or Jaren Jackson Jr. Number 4 now, and I really debated putting this guy at number 3 over Trey Young, but I just couldn't quite do it. And it's Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And this has been Something that some people saw this coming, right? In a new situation, hopefully having more responsibility in Oklahoma City. He had a good amount of responsibility last year with the Clippers, did some good things, a surprising amount of responsibility considering that team was 1, good, and 2, Doc Rivers typically, with rookies in general and specifically rookie point guards, takes his time integrating them into the system and into the offense. But he's taken a leap this year, and Gilgeous-Alexander is a player that I would not be surprised if down the road becomes an all-NBA caliber guy, which is not something that a lot of people were saying about him coming out of the draft. He's a two-way player. He can play on or off the ball. He can play make. He can shoot. He's still growing each and every day, and it's more about how he plays the game that excites me. It's not overwhelming you with athleticism, although he is a good athlete. It's not overwhelming you with great shooting, although he's a good shooter that is developing that. It's just, he's so steady, he's so poised, he does everything at his pace the way that he wants to do it. And again, the added benefit of being a two-way player, someone that can guard and someone that has size, made me almost put him over Trey Young in these rankings, but just the sheer statistical production and the volume of that production in Atlanta for Young puts him over the top of Gilgeous-Alexander. But if I had to bet on which player would in the long run be on more successful teams and be better as a player overall, I probably wouldn't hesitate to say that would be Gilgeous-Alexander. But as of right now, and just the re-ranking in 2020, a year and a half into these guys' careers, I'm going to put SGA fourth. So to recap, again, that's my top 4 where I feel like there's a pretty significant gap between those 4 guys and everybody else, being Luka, Jaren Jackson, and then Trey Young, then SGA. And now we move on to number 5. And at this point, for me, you can really go in any direction that you want to with these players in terms of how you rank them, what you think about them. I think there's 3 guys that intrigue me the most the rest of the way, but there's actually a ton of really talented players in this draft class, and you could go any direction. So I'm going to go through these a little bit quicker than I did with the top 4. Number 5 is going to be DeAndre Ayton, and I don't feel great about it because, you haven't seen him as much. He played a good amount in his first season and has missed, the 25 games due to suspension this season. And he's had some good games, but it's just so difficult to evaluate his growth from last season to this season. And, hopefully through the end of the season, we'll start to see some more out of him. But it just makes me nervous how allergic he seems to be to playing in the paint. And it just seems like all this guy wants to do is shoot mid-range jumpers, catch at the elbow, turn around and shoot a mid-range jumper, which is fine. Like, you want your bigs to develop their jump shot and work on shooting from the outside, which I think eventually is a place he's going to get. But you have to also establish, at least if you're going to be a number 1 overall pick, establish your ability to be dominant in the paint as well. Because if you just want a big that can shoot from the elbows and shoot from 3, you can find those guys, and you're not going to draft those guys with the number 1 overall pick. Still want to see some more growth from him defensively. That was the big issue in college, and last year it wasn't good at all. It started to get better throughout the season, and under Monty Williams, I would expect that would continue to improve for him in Phoenix. So just based off his sheer talent, I'm going to put him at 5. Honestly, I don't feel that great about it just because I don't know what he is at this point. Moving on to number 6, another guy we just haven't seen a lot of, but he looks so promising when he plays and when he's healthy, and it's Michael Porter Jr. And I really considered putting him at 5, but I couldn't justify it because I just gave you my whole reasoning for putting Ayton at 5 and not putting him higher or not considering him for higher, or just being nervous about that selection. That whole rationale was, we haven't seen him this year. We can't really, measure his growth. And Michael Porter Jr. didn't play last year and has only played in a handful of games in terms of playing starter level minutes to this point in the season. But from a scoring standpoint, from a size standpoint, from the skills and from his playmaking and all that stuff, this guy looks like he's going to be an absolute stud. And it's all about staying healthy, making sure that he continues to develop on the defensive end, does multiple things well as opposed to just scoring, and then he'll get his minutes in this Nuggets rotation more and more throughout the year. Maybe he'll have a good postseason. And moving forward, he's a guy that I'm really excited about to watch and kind of see how he develops. And then last up in this top 7, and again, I hesitated. I honestly considered just ranking the top 4 and then talking about the rest of the players because you really could rank these any way you want to. I still really like Wendell Carter Jr. And just from, again, a two-way perspective, someone that I think is going to be on winning teams at some point throughout his career. Obviously, Chicago's not playing all that well to this point in his career, but at some point, he just feels like a winning player to me. Someone that can defend, someone that is a good athlete, good enough to stay in front of guards, can protect the rim, but can also play well on ball screens, and is going to just continue to develop as an inside player, work on his mid-range jump shot. He really reminds me of an Al Horford type player, and I wouldn't be surprised, again, if he is just a guy that ends up on a good amount of winning teams throughout his career. I don't really have a ton to substantiate that with because he has missed a good amount of games. He struggled to stay on the floor at times, but I really believe that he is a talented player and someone that is going to be very good down the road. Now, list of players that I did not mention in this top 7 that you could absolutely make an argument to be in there depending on your evaluation of them. Marvin Bagley, who was a 2nd overall pick, I just haven't seen him a ton this year due to injuries, and he came off the bench so much last year. The fit is questionable in Sacramento, and the fit in general throughout the league for him is questionable because he has some skills that would make you think he's a 4, but he can't guard at the 5 because he's not a good enough defender, and it's like, okay, where do I put this guy? I don't know what to do. That's why he's out of the top 7. Next up now, Colin Sexton. Again, you could I guess argue that he could be in the top 7. Someone that coming out of the draft last year, you thought he's going to be really good defensively, and it's going to take him some time to develop the stuff on the offensive end, and really ended up being the other way around because especially towards the end of the season, he was putting up really good offensive numbers, but for whatever reason, just wasn't guarding very well at all. This year, he's turned around a lot of that defensive stuff, but I don't have any faith in his ceiling as like a potential all-NBA guy. Like maybe down the road will be an all-star, but I'm just not as high on him as some other people are. Another guy, Anthony Simons, another guard out of this draft in a very guard-heavy draft. Someone that I think has a ton of potential down the road, just doesn't have the size to be like an outstanding player, but worst case, as a really good 6-man throughout his career, I really like Anthony Simons' ability to score as well as play make. Again, I just wish he was a little bit bigger. Devontae Graham, probably the surprise of the season at this point, a extremely good high-volume three-point shooter, whether it's off the ball or off the dribble, and someone that is going to continue to develop. And again, just based off his production this year, you could potentially argue to put him in this top 7, and I would at least listen to your argument for a little bit. And then last up, Mitchell Robinson. Similar to Wendell Carter Jr. in terms of I think this guy's going to be on winning teams throughout his career at some point, whether it's in New York or once he leaves New York, if he ends up leaving. I think that his skill set just needs to be honed in a little bit. He still chases blocks a little bit too much, but he's so good at protecting the rim, and he's such a good athlete diving to the rim that he's going to be a valuable player throughout his career. Again, whether he ends up developing in New York or not, I really like him, and I think he's definitely one of, I would say, the top 10 players in what has been a stacked draft class to this point. But that is going to be the end of the video. Like I said in the beginning, man, like these are just my opinions. You're welcome to have different ones. That's the whole point of these videos, is ranking them and then comparing them to other people, listening to what other people have to say. This was a wildly tough draft class to evaluate outside of one being Luka. Everything else was really tough. There were tough decisions, which is good because it means that it was an extremely talented class. And I think it's going to be a class that's going to continue to show its talent throughout the rest of these guys' careers. It's going to be exciting to see them develop. But like I said, that is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.